A woman lost consciousness at an altitude of 10,000 meters, and as her falling speed increased, she suddenly woke up with a jolt. She tried to grab the cables on the hot air balloon, but it was all too late. She was plummeting uncontrollably. When she opened her eyes again, she realized she was hanging upside down in the air. The rope that had been tied to her earlier had saved her life. However, after the initial relief, she had to face an even more terrifying reality. At this moment, she remembered her companion in the basket and cried out for help. But the man had fallen into a coma due to lack of oxygen, and she couldn't check his vital signs now. The only person she could rely on was herself. She mustered up the courage and began swinging her legs in the air, unable to see the ground below. Through her efforts, she successfully grasped the edge of the basket and re-entered it. However, the crisis was far from over. Her companion had fallen into a coma and needed to be awakened as soon as possible. At this point, the balloon had reached an altitude of nearly 13,000 meters, and its exterior was covered in a thick layer of ice and snow, causing the exhaust valve to freeze and not open properly. As the hot air balloon continued to ascend, opening the exhaust valve above was their only hope for rescue. The woman decided to climb up and manually release the air, but this idea was extremely difficult to implement without any protective equipment. Even the slightest mistake could put her in danger, but she had no other choice. After climbing for what seemed like an eternity, she finally reached the edge of the hot air balloon, but when she looked up, she realized the top was still a great distance away, and her hands had already gone numb from the cold. At this moment, she tried to grab a nearby rope but nearly fell off the balloon due to a misstep. By now, the woman was severely oxygen deprived and felt very sleepy, but seeing her still unconscious companion, she regained her spirit and forced herself to stay awake. Then, she used all her strength to adjust her body and tried again to grasp the nearby rope. Finally, she succeeded and used the rope to pull herself up. At this point, the balloon was still rising, and time was running out. She tied the rope around her waist to prevent herself from falling. After doing this, the woman began climbing again, but she had to be extremely careful with every step. Her strong willpower sustained her as she struggled to the top of the hot air balloon. By now, she was exhausted to the point of collapse, but she had no time to rest. The hopes of her and her companion rested in her hands,